Morning, welcome to the Cider Party channel. 13th of July, Friday the 13th, never mind, I'm not superstitious. Donald Trump is in the UK, he met May last night, he gave an interview to the Sun newspaper. And he told Mrs. May basically that the deal that she's cooked up for Brexit is not the deal we voted for. He's totally right. Totally agree with him. That's what I've been saying over the last couple of videos. But what we haven't been told is the BBC are still only reporting that 2 ministers have resigned. It could be up to 5. We know that Steve Baker has resigned, who was the second to David Davis. And we now hear that the vice chairman of the Conservative Party has also resigned over Brexit. I'm told there's a 5th, but I haven't yet been able to find out who it is in the name. But I'm told it was another junior minister. How many more are going to go? Doesn't May understand that she's cooked a deal up that isn't what we voted for? But the Brexiteers have got a good case. They are standing up for what we voted for, the people. And they're the only people that represent us. May be the elected Prime Minister, but she isn't going what was in her manifesto. They said that they would, Brexit meant Brexit. She said it herself. Brexit means Brexit. So the deal that she's got is pro-EU. Are they 5th columnists working for the EU? Question mark. I can't say it directly because it might not be true, but it sure does look like it. Now, Trump's not making the BBC very happy at the moment. They're all on about what he said in the Sun. But you've got to remember that Donald Trump is mates with Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage would have briefed Donald Trump on the Brexit deal. So of course Donald Trump is going to be on our side. Oh, don't you get this? Donald Trump is on our side. We voted to leave the EU and he agrees. It's a mess. It's how we get out of it. We got people in control, May, Hammond and the other remainers within the Conservative Party who aren't working for the people, otherwise they'd put Brexit through. How are we going to change this? Well, May's got to go. That's the only thing we can do. We need a Prime Minister that voted to leave the EU. We need a Prime Minister that understands what Brexit means and will do the will of the people. What happens if she calls another staff election after Trump goes to maintain her position? Well, my view is that anybody that votes should vote for an MP that's going to give us Brexit. Because at the moment, MPs are mainly for Remain. The House of Lords are EU yes men. They've been put in place, I expect, over the last 5 years because of this. Who do we trust? Can't trust the House of Lords anymore. They're all hereditary, they're all life peers. Now, life peers, are they constitutional? The rules allow life peers to be created, and that comes from the 1911 Parliament Act. The Liberal government in 1911 couldn't put a budget through, so they created the Parliament Act and created life peers, and they filled the House of Commons with life peers to get their budget through. So, have the pro-Euro people behind the government, the cabal, whatever it is, allowed or nominated or controlled pro-EU life peers to get into the House of Lords in case we had a pro-Brexit Tory government after the election? I pose the question. I think the answer would be yes, but I can't prove it. Now, are life peers constitutional? Well, under the Constitution, which basically comes from the Bill of Rights, the Act of Settlement, which dates back to after the Civil War, and then we had the Glorious Revolution. The Civil War in 1640, 1644 didn't sort things out. Cromwell was a military dictator. England was under military rule. So that didn't solve the problem of the Crown and Parliament and the people. It was for the writings of people like Locke and the enlightened ones in the late 1600s, 1680, people like John Locke said the king did not have the divine right of kings and the king is not above the law. That must also be true about the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is not above the law. Now I'm thinking back to when Tony Blair took Britain into the Iraq War and just announced that he was going to do it. I think it's wrong. I think that life peers are questionable. I think the idea of having life peers was not the original idea of the people that wrote the Bill of Rights and John Locke. I don't believe that life peers can be seen as constitutional. Although the rules allow it, doesn't make it right. I believe that we may not have had a constitutional parliament, as Lords, Commons and Her Majesty, since we removed the hereditary peers. The hereditary peers were part of the government, part of the parliament. So they removed the hereditary peers after 400 years, and they elect 37 hereditary peers onto the red benches of the House of Lords. Then they fill it with all these life peers, who we don't have a clue who they are, and are hell-bent on us staying in the EU. My view is we ought to question the Parliament Act, we ought to question the right for life peers, we ought to bring back the hereditary peers, you know, and they say, oh, we'll have a second elected house. No, you can't have two elected houses. We're not the United States, because then the House of Lords will think that it's got as much power as the House of Commons and nothing will be solved. What we need is a proper House of Lords again. We've got to cut down on the number of life peers at least. We just can't keep producing life peers. There's more life peers than there are seats for them to sit on. There needs to be an infinite number, and if we are going to have life peers, then there ought to be a certain number, like the American Supreme Court. One dies and one goes on, or one retires and one goes on. This should be the same with life peers. There should be, I don't know, 200, 100, cut them down. How many life peers are there? And what do they actually do? Some of them do a lot of good work. You know, scrutinising the legislation as it goes through. Some of them are just using it as a gravy train. You know, be in London, be in the clubs, and then voting fodder for, yeah, what I said. Yes, men for the EU. The other strange thing that happened is I read in the, I think it was in the Telegraph website I read, that, no, I'll tell you where it was. It was the Spectator. It was in the Spectator online, I saw it. Mrs. May, before she went to Chequers last Friday, had okayed the deal with Mrs. Merkel, the German Chancellor. So what hope did Boris and David Davis and the other Brexiteers have of changing the deal if it's already been okayed with the EU? So this proves that May is working for the EU rather than us. Why should Mrs. Merkel be involved in how we want to see the deal? Oh, the whole thing stinks. And if Mrs. May is going to Mrs. Merkel to get the okay for a deal, then, well, I'm sorry, but it's time for her to go. It just ain't right. So, this is Ian, Cider Party Channel, signing off. And there's supposed to be a press conference today with Trump and May. I think that's going to be quite interesting to watch. Tennis is on as well, so I expect I'll flop between the two of them while I'm working. Got the television on in the workshop. We'll see what happens. May and Trump this afternoon, after his comments to the Sun that May had a bad deal and the United States deal with the UK may not happen if her EU deal goes through. Let's find out what happens. Speak to you tomorrow. Goodbye.